will either make it, the ball start rolling, make it happen,
Yes.
or
Find a better
there'll be
use.
enough opposition that they'll say, you know what, we want to buy this corner back from the city and give you back the $200,000 we waived in park impact fees when we decided to make that a city park that nobody knows about or uses.
Yes, and you have to maintain.
Well, let's go ahead. We're on the record, so let's go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I am on the agenda today to give the thought or prayer, and so I would like to share some statistics just for fun. So this weekend, I got on the Utah real estate website to see what the available housing for sale for ownership is in Centerville. So as of August 24th of 2019, there were 31 properties for sale. How many of those do you think were single-family homes that were $300,000 or less?
And this is not under contract, right?
Well, it
Are
might
these
have
under
been.
contract?
Yeah, it was just whatever popped up. So
Single-family homes under 300?
single-family homes under 300,000.
4.
Yeah, single digits.
Zero. Not a single as of August 24th of 2019, not a single family home was available for sale in Centerville for under $300,000. The least expensive single family home for sale, according to UtahRealEstate.com, was one for $334,900. That's it. That was the least expensive single family home in Centerville. Now, between that price, lowest price, and $400,000, 8 homes, 8 single-family homes. Between $400,000 and $500,000, 2. Between $500,000 and $600,000, 1. Between $600,000 and $700,000, 3. Between $700,000 and above, 8. So when you add up all of that, 57% of the single-family homes for sale in Centerville were over $400,000. Now, again, just for grins and giggles here, what does that mean in terms of a monthly house payment? So I took that very bottom, lowest threshold house for $334,000, and I ran it through just an online calculator that calculated what would the 30-year mortgage on a $334,000 house be at 3.38% financing, which is what popped up in the box. $1,478 a month. And that does not include taxes and other things that would include. So really, I mean, anybody trying to purchase that home is realistically looking at probably $1,600, $1,700 a month. And if you look at the $400,000 home, running it through a 30-year mortgage, that was $1,769. So they're looking at close to $1,900, $2,000 a month for a single-family home. Why am I saying this? Well, we in our city, I've heard a lot of people talk about the desire to try to maintain single-family homes, single-family residences. And if we have already had, you know, if you purchased in and you already have a single-family home, it's great. These home prices are fantastic for current owners. But I think that it demonstrates that it is really hard if you're a young person starting out with a young family. You know, you're coming out of college and you've already got a mortgage payment in student debt. You know, you are one of our amazing firefighters or police officers or teachers or civil servants. I think that we are pricing these people out of being able to live in our communities if we focus so hard on single-family residences that we exclude multifamily housing. Because I will tell you that of those 31 properties that were for sale, there were 9 of them for sale at $324,000 or less. So the range was from about $180,000 to $324,000, and all of them were townhomes and condos. So I think that we just need to be very cognizant as we are doing planning that if we do focus so hard on only single-family residences, I think that we are excluding a lot of people who would be able to live and raise their families in our communities. So Anyway, that is it for statistics. Okay, couple items on our agenda today. First item is we are looking to consider the proposed final site plan for the Island View Park, phases 1 and 2, which is a renovation of that park and its facilities located at 700 East, 500 South. So I will turn the time over to staff.
Okay, so there's not much to explain on this one. I know there's been some changes in the plan since we saw it last, so I'll have Bruce explain those later. The only things that you really to go over in those previous listed things to do is on the plans. They just weren't very specific about pavilion heights and light directions, but you can just get those in the plans. But everything else on the conceptual site plan has been completed, and they've started going forward as far as I understand.
Any questions for staff? If not, we will invite the applicant to step forward and speak to this if you would like. Just go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Bruce Cox, Centerville City Parks and Recreation Director. Mackenzie alluded to there's been a change in the Phase 1 plan since we came last time. Do we have a, Mackenzie, is there a diagram or up there of Phase 1? That shows it. Maybe I'll walk over to the other microphone so I can point at some things.
Bruce, I think there's a pointer right in front on the, yeah.
So the original plan that we came with showed us replacing the 2 tennis courts.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tennis court. And here you see, instead of 2 tennis courts, we have 2 pickleball courts. Right here, this is a natural gas line. We knew there was gas line that ran through the park, and we talked to our designers about that, and that there's an easement. We need to work around that, and what we didn't realize is it's the natural gas line. It comes over the mountains in Bountiful, runs across the
natural gas.
It comes across the mountain along the Bonneville shoreline along the Firebreak Road and comes down through Island View Park. It feeds everything from North Salt Lake to Ogden. It's the natural gas line. We thought we could look at maybe changing the city's motto from the friendly city beside the Great Salt Lake to your gas goes through us or something.
Or we've got gas.
So, yeah. So,
Sorry.
I'm
sorry.
and when this park was originally built, the easement was put in place, and the gas company has rules about their easements and things, but that was 40 years ago, and their rules have got much stricter because they've gotten burned on a few things, and they actually have been really good to work with. They said, we're okay if you want to go ahead with your plans as they are, but we need this, because this line was put in over 40 years ago. If we'd he says the lines we're putting in now are rated for 100 years. He says, but when this line was put in, it's only rated for about 50 years, and we're in the 40-plus area. He says, so this line will need to be replaced sooner than later. And he says, I don't know if that'll be in 2 years or in 8 or 10, but he says it will have to be replaced sooner than later. And we will need the city to agree to pay the cost of tearing out the new tennis court and putting back a new tennis court when we replace that line. And we went back to the drawing board and realized at post-tension concrete and $80,000 court, we don't want to pay the cost of ripping it out and putting it back in. And so this is the Plan B.
And they wouldn't just replace it now?
They need it's not on their
Okay.
budget. They haven't budgeted for it, and it's not on their plan to do right now, and it would set our project back.
Yeah.
With our grant. We have a deadline and things like that, so
Okay.
it didn't work to it's a really large line and requires a lot of I guess a lot of planning and careful. It's not something they could quickly fix. So They require a 15-foot off either direction, so a 30, and then the line itself is a couple of feet, so it's about a 32-foot wide easement. And that's what these two lines represent, 15 feet off and 15 feet off. And in that area, they prefer no trees be planted on top of the gas line, no retaining walls be built on top of that wall, and no tennis courts or buildings or structures. So this new plan shows 2 pickleball courts, and then this will be a grass area where the gas line is, and then we've enhanced, we've added more trees along this west area. Ideally, sports courts go north and south so that you don't get sun in your eyes in the evening or in the mornings. This part, because of its topography, doesn't have that problem in the morning because of the mountain, the hillside. You won't have to worry about sun in your eyes in the morning, but it will have, as the sun sets, there will be sun in the eyes of players there and for that period of time. So for that, until we've done heavy trees along here, as close as we can plant them and still get lawnmowers around them and things. But until those fill in, there will be an hour or so each evening when the sun's undesirable for those courts. But the other option was to just do one court, north and south, or have to cut deeper into this hillside and put in an expensive 10-foot retaining wall, which would drive our costs up quite a bit. So it wasn't something that we would have changed if we didn't have to, but I actually feel like it's a really good compromise. Going into it, the process to get the federal grant is very competitive, and the advice that we were given from the state is your best chance at getting the grant is if you replace the 2 tennis courts with 2 tennis courts. They give that a more favorable look than something that's taking something out and putting something different in. And so for that reason, we steered clear of pickleball courts, even though we had some popular requests for them. And we also felt that when we do pickleball courts, we want to do 8 or 10 of them. Two is kind of a Band-Aid on the demand. I think this makes for a good compromise. It actually makes so more people can play at the same time. Yeah, we're giving up a tennis court, and maybe we can make that up in a later revision of one of our other parks or something. But do you have any questions about that?
With regards to the open grass area now that's going to be on that north end, just is that like soccer field size, or
No.
how big is that?
So here, this is a tennis court.
Okay.
And so it's 2/3 of a tennis court, or maybe a little more than half of a tennis court. It's kind of in a teardrop shape here. It squares off. So we're thinking this might be a great place to put another smaller pavilion with a couple of picnic tables.
Yeah.
It's big enough to throw a frisbee or kick a soccer ball around with some little kids or something, but certainly isn't big enough for a court or a field.
Yeah, that was my question, is I just didn't want it to become a wasted space, so I was wondering if you're planning on putting benches or a pavilion or something to kind of encourage some use to move that way.
So this area, outside of the easement, we can do a concrete pad with a pavilion and picnic tables. We have benches in between the courts and on the sides all around, but sure, other park benches are always welcome. We have heavy park benches around the playground area. But it is an open space that we can be creative with. And for right now, it'll just be grass with trees around it. But this level won't have any
Other
open
grass,
space.
yeah,
The open
that'll
space
be
is going
nice.
to be up a level. There's a little bit here, but not a lot. So some open space is good.
Any other questions for the applicant?
So up a level is the top level, you're saying?
Do you have that? Phase 2? Yeah. So just for reference, this
There
is
it
the
is.
existing parking
Okay,
lot.
perfect.
This is where you come into the parking lot.
Yeah.
This is what we were just talking about, tennis court area, pickleball area. So this is the sloped hill, and there's
Is there a better one?
you don't see it on that one, but there's there we go. this is the sidewalk that'll come up that hill over, and this is the top level playground.
And the tennis court, obviously in that picture, is changed.
Right, this is
Yeah.
2 pickleball courts. So,
Perfect.
So this is a phase 2 plan, and phase 1 got a change to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the phase 2 part, just so for reference, right now on the top part, that's where the little baseball diamond part is, right in the corner? Okay,
Back here, yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, that's what this fence represents.
Okay, perfect.
This end largely stays the same. There isn't any changes to that. There's a concrete irrigation bunker that's coming out. It'll just be taken out and grassed over. We're making some improvements to the irrigation system. The areas that have to be new sidewalks will get new sidewalks. This is the new restroom building. Will be a top-level restroom. The playground, and this, we put it as an alternate right now. It's another pavilion, but we have to see if there's enough money. If not, that might be something that gets cut out.
Okay.
And if it does get cut out, there's currently a 2 picnic table pavilion there that will stay there if we don't build a new one. So there is something there. It's just whether we take it out and put something bigger in or not.
Great. Any other questions for the applicant?
Looks great.
If not, this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing. So we'll take the opportunity to open a public hearing, invite any member of the public who wishes to speak to step forward. Seeing no one else present, we'll close the public hearing. Any other questions for staff or discussion?
I think this was a great solution to a problem, not a problem, but an issue that came up. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be happy about the pickleball courts.
Yeah.
So that's good. I mean, maybe there's going to be some difficulties with it, but I think you guys did a great job addressing an issue.
And I know the Parks and Rec Committee is working towards, and the city manager already asked our city engineer to get going on the designs for pickleball courts as funding becomes available. We've got a couple of different locations at our community park or other parks where there's lots of parking and noise is more conducive to pickleball courts that we think. I'm hoping that they'll actually use up the rest of the wetland area that we have, that we could mitigate that, and I think we could put 10 or 12 courts in there if we could afford it. So that would
In
be awesome.
community
At the
park?
community park on the west end.
Wow.
So you've got the frontage road and the freeway, so the noise isn't as big an issue.
Yeah.
You have your closest neighbors are the Chase Lane Village neighbors over there, and right now it's an unused space that's just wetland. We can't do much with it other than cut the weeds down a couple times a year.
Or put
But
parking,
but we,
because that place is under.
you can't park it. Yeah, you can't do that. But right now you can buy credits into a wetland bank at the Machine Lake wetlands up by Willard Bay, and it's about $55,000 an acre, and that area is just a little under an acre. So for $45,000 to $50,000, we could mitigate that, and then we could make it more parking. We could make it pickleball courts. We could throw in some disc golf targets. We could use it as a park instead of just having a weedy mosquito breeding area.
What about Porter Walton for pickleball?
That's another.
Did they talk about that?
You wouldn't, right now, you wouldn't be able to put a lot there, and you wouldn't have a lot of parking there, whereas the community park has a couple hundred parking spaces, and but you could, if you want to do something like we're doing at Island View, it's just a couple courts.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think the ideal is to do a complex where pickleball is very social, and a lot of people go in groups or meet other people there and play them, and so there's advantages to the sport and socially to have multiple courts, and and those around that have done 6 and 8 have waiting lines. So we're thinking maybe 10 or 12. Brigham City just, I think, finished their 28th court at their complex, and they host I don't know if it's a national tournament, but they bought the tournament, so they now host it up there, and, and it's just a really appeals to a large audience. This sport does.
Yeah, great.
Well, it sounds like we've got some options, and I really like what we've done with this Island View Park. So if there's no further discussion, the chair will entertain a motion.
I have a question real quick.
Oh, question.
First, I'm sorry. So,
Go
I don't, for Mackenzie or Bruce, either one of you, on the staff report, there was the previous conceptual site plan acceptance, and items 2 and 6 are both listed as incomplete. Could you just talk about, so that's accessory building height and lighting. Talk about where we are with that, why that's incomplete, what we're waiting for.
We're just waiting for some revisions to the plan, and those are just minor things that weren't included on the plan originally.
We're going with the same light poles and same lighting on the pickleball courts that we had on the tennis courts. They actually had already ordered them in a situation we couldn't send them back. So the pickleball courts are going to be really well lit. They have a recommended number of candles per square foot of lumens, and it's between 40 and 50. And the way we had it designed was going to be in the 30s and 40s. And with putting in the poles that were already coming and having the extra poles, we're going to be in the 50s and 60s. So the pickleball courts will be really well lit. They are all down directional LED lights, so they're very efficient electrical. And as soon as you get 1 or 2 feet off of the playing courts, the candles go down to 3 and 4 lumens of light. So it should not bother neighbors at all, but it should be really bright on the courts.
So those 2 things are just listed as conditions of acceptance today.
Right, I just wanted to get a feel for kind of what they were, what we were waiting for on those things.
I can show you some pictures of it's called a mesa roof style, where it has four pitches. They're not tall. They're actually pretty low profile as far as pavilions go. The small one we put at the west end of the community park, it's that same pavilion. Just exactly that same pavilion will be going on the lower level of Island View, and then if we end up putting the one at the top, it'll just be a little bit larger than that. But it's the same company, same roof style. And it's actually very low profile. When we did pick that on purpose because of the high winds we have that go through that area.
So what we're talking about here is mainly that one on the lower level of Island View Park. That's what we're waiting for, is kind of the final specs of that one.
We have it. We've ordered it, and it's the same exact pavilion as the one at the community park, west end of the community park.
That's fine. I just wanted to get a feel for what that was
Yeah.
that we were waiting for. So
Yeah, if the concern is that the roof's too high, it's not. It will be very low. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Now Logan.
all right.
Going to make a motion.
Chair will entertain such motion.
I gotta scroll back up to it. Just kidding. I hereby make the motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan for Island View Park renovation phases 1 and 2, subject to the following conditions 1 through 3 in the staff report, with the finding or reasons for action A as listed in the staff report.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? If not, we'll start with you, Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a real quick procedural question? This is for Mackenzie probably, and you can punt this to Corey if you want. But explain to me, and I'm not really complaining, but I just want to understand. So we saw the conceptual site plan for this park and now the final site plan, but the construction is already very well underway. How does that happen that we get so far along the way of the process and then we're now just approving it?
That might be a better question for Elisa.
Oh.
Usually, construction doesn't happen until after final site plan approval.
Right. That's why I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with how this came up or how zoning was notified that they needed to get a final site plan, but it probably was just missed. So.
It might be my fault too, that I wasn't aware that I needed to go through that process. This is my first time going through the process, and Corey was telling me, hey, you need to fill out this application and you need to get going on this. In the past, I think Blaine Lutz must have been the one, or maybe it was Kevin Campbell had done it, but I'm a little slower, and I think they are giving us some leeway because we are the city, and so.
Okay. Thanks.
But yeah, I think normally that all comes in a better process and much sooner.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Second item on our agenda, we have a matter involving the Theros landscaping plan. I don't see the applicant here. Have you had any communication with them? Do we anticipate they're going to be here?
They didn't let me know if they were coming, but they've been informed of the meeting. So,
Well, we can proceed, right?
You know, why don't we, given that they're not here yet, but that they may still come, I'm inclined to go ahead and let's just put this one on hold and move to the next item on our agenda, and then we will circle back around. When they get here, and if they don't, then we can tackle this one at the end. So let me just move that out. Okay, so we will hold off on item number 2 and move right along to item number 3, which is a continued discussion of proposed revisions to our city subdivision ordinance CMC 15. Turning the time back over to Lisa.
Thank you. So we have before you, for the next chapter in our subdivision ordinance review, chapter 1511, regarding condominiums. And in reviewing our current subdivision ordinance, we actually do not have a chapter regarding condominiums. So it's essentially a platting procedure where you, rather than dividing the land, you're dividing the buildings above the land. And we do reference, we define it in our subdivision ordinance, and we talk about required compliance with the state code, and we address condominiums a few places in our zoning code. But anyway, this will be a completely new chapter that staff wanted to recommend because we were obviously getting condominium plats, and there's some things with condominiums that are just a little different from your regular subdivision. For instance, there's CC&Rs and bylaws and other things and that typically come with those condominium plats. So it's a new chapter, and but it's fairly simple, and I am open to, again, any kind of feedback from the Planning Commission. But what is proposed here is very similar to the plat amendment process, where we decided that we were just going to go with one step and say, okay, with condo plats, obviously they have to do a lot more work because it's one step. So they're going to have their CC&Rs ready and all of their engineering and all of that. But a lot of times, I don't know the statistics, but often you will already have a building that someone wants to condominiumize. So they build the building under a site plan approval process, then they come in later and they divide it all out. So if they're just building from the ground up, though, the ordinance does say that you'll probably need a site plan as well as your subdivision. So it's a one step with final decision at the Planning Commission. So a recommendation from the zoning administrator, and a decision and public hearing at the Planning Commission level. If the Planning Commission finds this proposal acceptable, I think we can try it. This would be an experiment and say, oh, okay, we'll do a few condo plats. We don't get a lot. I mean, maybe just one a year, if that. So let's try it and see if we can streamline these, help out the developers, make it a little faster process, a little less expensive, because they don't have all those application fees for 2 different procedures, and just make sure we get enough information, see if we feel like we need the 2 steps. But so you'll see on the first page under authority that this is under the Planning Commission authority as an administrative decision. And the procedure is a one-step process, but may also require site plan if the building is not already up. Sometimes these require both. So on page 2, we don't have too many submittal requirements, but basically they have to give us the 3 hard copies and electronic copy of the proposed condominium plat. But that plat has to comply with our final plat requirements in Chapter 7. This is the same thing we did with plat amendments. So go to Chapter 7, follow everything in there, and then they also have to comply with the provisions in Title 57. So in the state code, Title 57 is your real estate code. So this isn't the land use statute. This is the real estate code where they regulate And they actually have a statute that specifically says for condominium plats, this is what you need. And it's about a page and a half. So in addition to our Chapter 7 final plat, you also have to comply with all of those state statutory. I decided it wasn't necessary to put all that laundry list in our code. We're just going to refer staff and perhaps our forms to that state statute. And then you have to have your condominium declaration and bylaws. And then I said, or amendments, because oftentimes they may already have those for a project, but they'd have to amend them. And then also perhaps the site plan application. So then from there on, the rest of this chapter should look very familiar, because this is just the procedure from all of our other provisions, where the zoning administrator makes sure the application is complete, sends it on to the department heads, the development review committee meets, then the zoning administrator makes a written recommendation to the planning commission. The planning commission holds a public hearing, makes a decision, and then we have these same procedures about, remember I've said these provisions on submittal and review of the final plat, where we describe Centerville's paper plat process. So I just spelled all those out again. So in every chapter, we can just hand people, here's your condominium, but there is a lot of work that goes in after the planning commission, making sure engineering is done and all the legal work on the title. So those are the next 2 pages of submittal and review of the final paper plat, and then submittal and recording of the final Mylar. The approval requirements are the same, except for I added that they have to comply with the Utah Condominium Ownership Act. That's a little different. But all the appeal and expiration and everything is the same as our other procedures. So we're really sort of definitely streamlining it, and but also using a procedure throughout the code for more uniform consistency of procedure and staff review. So I'm happy to, if you have any comments, page by page, or just I also wanted to mention that I put in your packet, I don't know if it was highlighted, but I put in a proposed new table of contents. So I know the Planning Commission has asked a couple times, how many more chapters do we have? How quickly can we get through this? I mean, I appreciate all the time you're taking on it, and also the patience, for staff to get you these chapters. But so you may think, oh, why are we at 11 when, we were a little bit higher? So I've just made some suggestions here as we're going through. So when the final comes back to you, there probably will be a lot of renumbering and reshuffling, but just trying to keep things, in my mind, flowing from, when the first application comes in and having it make sense throughout the process. So you'll see that I'm suggesting breaking out a new chapter for noticing. So this is kind of to mirror the state statutes in the Land Use Management Act. They have, a general provisions, and then they have a chapter just on noticing. And I just think it's going to be so much easier for staff and the city recorder to find the noticing provisions if we just have one chapter and all the noticing, and that's the way they do it in the state code, all the noticing is in one chapter. And it took us a while to get used to the state statute, because we liked having, the plat amendment and then the noticing right there. But now that we've used it that way, I think I actually like it. So you just know you go to chapter 4, noticing. So that's my suggestion, which will require a lot of renumbering and searching and redoing all the numbering. But so then you'd have your conceptual, preliminary, and final. And then I'm just suggesting a reserved chapter 9, for example, if we want to put flag lots back in or something, but it's not really an expandable numbering, so I wanted to leave one there. And then we do small subdivisions, condominiums, property line adjustments, and then the street vacations, and then the plat amendments. And then I'm suggesting another reserved chapter, and then we get into just the general subdivision provisions and all the bonding procedures. So hopefully you're okay with that. I think it flows a little bit better, so we have, just the general conceptual, preliminary, final, and then we have sort of the odd, small subdivisions, condominiums, plat amendments, and then back to, here's our general subdivision requirements and all the bonding. So if you look at this, I think we've done plat amendments, so technically the next one might be the property line adjustments or the street and utility vacation. I did attend a land use task force meeting today, though, and they're proposing a number of edits to the subdivision ordinance, or the subdivision statutes again. So we're going to make all these changes, and then come next March, we'll probably make some more amendments. But I actually like the direction that they're going, and the state statutes are kind of trying to simplify it. So with some of that heads up, I think it'll help in our drafting of these. Maybe we can try to predict, the direction. So anyway, hopefully that helps. We're getting there. Still have a few chapters to go.
Looks good to me. I didn't have any comments or suggestions. Anyone else?
No, I like it.
Okay.
That's good.
Makes sense to me. Thanks, Lisa. Moving right along, item number 4 on our agenda. So we're going to be discussing the general plan for the South Main Street corridor. I think that staff had us looking at focusing primarily on section 4, which is the corridor street space expectation, with the possibility of getting into the residential reintroduction opportunities in section 5. Given that we're down 2 members today, I am inclined to focus on section 4 and wait and talk more about section 5 at our next meeting. But with that sort of thought process, I will turn the time back over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Heyman and Commissioners. So I am not Corey, so I can't give all his verve to this topic. But there are 2 things that we'd like to do today. Go over the corridor street space expectations, and then set up what you want to do as far as noticing the city council, because we've mentioned having work sessions with them to keep them up to date. So those are the 2 things Corey really wants to get out of today. So let me find the right page. Okay, so if you've read it, and if you've ever talked to Corey, he really wants to get this plan of the future. He gave me a few notes that I'll briefly mention. So in the traffic sector, to focus on multiple types of vehicles and flow, and to lower the speeds so that we have more options, to recommend to UDOT that the speeds be lowered through that section. As far as the pedestrian section, make it more enticing, safer, and then for the development sector, change those frontages from what is currently listed in the South Main Street corridor plan. So there have been a few back and forth with the roadway. So it's currently 40 miles an hour. I'd like to bring that down between 30 and 40. Possibly include bike lanes, recommend restriping of that section, keep the travel lanes 12 feet, and reduce that center lane to 11 feet, but mostly include that bike lane. And then as far as, he also mentioned, and I don't know if it's in here, yes, there it is, wayfinding, create more sense of place by adding signs that would lead you through the city to landmarks, safety precautions, but he also wanted to make sure that those weren't just run-of-the-mill signs that kind of give you a sense of place, nicer signs, frames. He did say, the places I like that have this are Park City and Telluride, so he's reaching for the stars, which is great. So those were the few highlights that he wanted me to cover in that streetscape. And then the next one, the park strip stipulations. So as we've discussed before, there are height differences from the west side to the east side. And so he mentioned, or in his staff report mentions, not allowing trees on the east side because it's the shorter space, and there are overhead lines. Whether that will bump up against general plan park strip trees, which is already being debated, I don't know. But he mentioned, bumping up the width of the sidewalks, especially with this in section 4B2 and II, with the framing system, so have about a foot on each side of the sidewalk of a darker, different color to expand the sidewalk, but also to make it a little more appealing visually, but without having to tear up what is already there and replace it all, just to add up that buffer. Let's see. So the next one, those lighting stipulations. Once again, improve lighting, but either in bollards or in smaller, nicer poles that give a sense of space. And then he mentions again information. So information, wayfinding features. And then section 4B4, utility poles and lines, community banners, public art. And this is more of the this place finding and community building section. So that you're in Centerville, you're on Main Street by nicer types of poles, more banners, more flags. And then he brought up, I think he sent an email to the commission of wrapping the utility boxes. So he included that in this section just to give a chance for the community to come together, showcase their strengths. And then, let's see. So previously in the South Main Street Corridor Plan, it had discussed having all of the buildings close to the street and parking in the rear, but that seems to be going away. So he still wanted to include having buffers and still good landscaping. If we can't get everything right on the street and parking in the rear, to at least minimize the visual impact of the parking lots, and to add more green space to that. Let's see if there's anything else that I need to highlight. The priority signing stipulations went over. Let's see if he gave me any specific. He did mention bollards a lot. He likes bollards for lighting. So he wants low profile signs, wants low profile lighting, so bollards, but also lower signs, and then wall mounted signs instead of priority, instead of the freestanding signs. So that is the corridor, the street corridor section. So if you have any questions, or if this is now your turn to talk it out and change Corey's mind. But
Great. Thank you very much. So before we start discussing, any questions for staff?
I have a question about the decorative framing on the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the idea of having those hard surface framing strips that allow us to increase the width, but also not pull up the existing sidewalk. That being said, how does that occur when you want to have that on both sides if the sidewalk automatically already goes to
the street.
the street?
That is a solid question. And I don't know if I'm fully qualified to answer that, but he wants, in the end, to have park strips on both sides and have that buffer for the sidewalk. So, and there is the couching wording in there when sites are redeveloped to include Park Strip and include that wider sidewalk. So
Okay.
for the sidewalks currently that are up against the street, they wouldn't be adding that one side buffer.
And then sort of related to that, I'm just trying to figure out if there's a desire to have wider sidewalks, and we don't want to allow any park strip material that is hardscape or hard surface. I sort of see that there's a little bit of tension between those two things. Not that we want to just have hardscape in our park strip, but like the whole thing. But I think prohibiting that, is there a reasoning behind prohibiting that, or?
Prohibiting hardscape?
Yeah, did he talk about that at all?
So currently hardscape is prohibited throughout the city. So
Right.
there's limitations on what you can put in that park strip. Not that that is followed throughout the city. There's lots of instances of hardscape within the park strip. But that's a general principle for kind of beautification. Also, if there's utilities in the park strip, you can actually get to the utilities. But
So how
on that
does-
west side, there isn't those utilities in that space, so.
But how does that relate to the previous plan where there were going to be sections that had that?
Right. So if I'm understanding correctly, include the park strip so that there is some green space, is some buffer, but just minimized from that previous plan. If that's answering the question you asked.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We can talk more about it together as a planning commission.
Any other questions for staff before we open this one up for discussion? All right. Well, I am going to propose that we do this as we've done in the past and just sort of walk through these piece by piece. And if you have a question or a comment or suggestion, we'll just make it as we march through. And then at the end, once we've had a chance to discuss all this, then we'll circle back around and talk about how we think we want to get, when we want to get the city council involved. Okay, so starting with just the overall statement here of goal 4. Any concerns about defining these in the 3 ways that he's done with a traffic sector, a pedestrian sector, a development sector?
I don't think so. I really like what he said. I just was looking at that goal and wondering if that's a strong statement of what our goal is for the street space. If our whole main focus is to improve the relationship between the private development and the public space, is that our goal? Or is our goal to improve the relationship? Maybe not, I don't know, it's like the relationship between private development and public space? Or is the goal to increase the public space, period, to improve, I don't know, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just trying to figure out, did we agree on that goal, that our goal is to improve the relationship between the public space and private development?
So I thought that it was more about beautifying the street through a partnership with private development.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know if the relationship is the main focus of what our goal is, so I think maybe that goal, we could just maybe suggest some verbiage like you just mentioned, sort of more similar to what you said. I don't know, did anyone else feel that same way? Is that our goal, to, in making a nice street space, is the purpose for doing so to improve the relationship between private development and public space? To me, it's not, but does anyone else feel like it is?
I mean, I will speak since nobody else is speaking. It hadn't struck me as wrong until you said something, and now I'm thinking it through and thinking, maybe that isn't quite what we were thinking. I mean, I view it as more of an opportunity for us to improve our public space through
partnerships
through
or
working with it is not to develop
a
the
relationship?
relationship itself. It's to be kind of callous about it, it's to leverage that relationship to make our public space better. I wouldn't say it exactly that way, obviously. But I mean, to be perfectly candid, I mean, that really is what we're trying to do. We as a city can't come in and put in all of those improvements, so we're asking
And we're not doing it for the purpose of improving our relationship with private development and the public space. That's what I saw. That's what kind of felt weird to me, is I was like, I don't know if that's our goal.
If the word relationship was like intersection, I mean, I don't know if I understood your concern correctly. He's talking about how the road relates to the private development. So that area in between, so you have your commercial building. Then
yes.
the relationship is, how do you transition from the front yard
Right.
through the sidewalk
Right.
into the actual traffic lane?
That makes way more sense.
But I agree, relationship makes it seem, I mean, intersection or the area between private development and public space. But
Okay.
it kind of is a relationship, you know.
What about if we were to say, enhance the corridor's built environment by visually improving the public space through private development or through a relationship with private development? Because really the whole goal is to improve the public
Yes,
space.
exactly. The whole goal is to
Like-
improve the public space.
But we're also, I mean, if you look at number C, it's the development sector. That's the front yard. That's the
Yeah.
actual private space
True.
Yeah,
that impacts the public space.
right.
That and I think there's, you know, as you have entrances into buildings and different things, there is a little bit of a
Public-private.
transition.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd hate to stick it to Corey and say, well, we want to forget private space, because that will impact
Affect.
the public space as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But
I liked kind of what you were saying. What was the word that you used?
intersections, I don't know.
Intersection.
Transition.
The transition.
I think intersection's kind of cool. That might lead us to think of like a traffic intersection.
Sure,
Yeah.
which should be part of it, yeah.
But that might be misleading, I think. Is
That's
the
what I'm
point,
saying,
right?
it's
Is it
misleading.
more misleading in a relationship, though?
No, but here's the thing. I don't mind the word relationship, because we do need a relationship between public and private here, because we're kind of anticipating working together as you transition from public to private as you go along there. So you need that relationship to make it work, so that it doesn't feel so heavy-handed or one-sided.
But I think when
But that's not the
Corey-
main goal, is it?
Well, I think when Corey was using the word relationship, he wasn't talking about
I agree.
interpersonal relationships.
I
He was
agree.
talking about the physical
The
built
physical
I
environment.
think he is
relations, yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Relation to.
But you're right, there's a cool double meaning there that is
yeah,
useful.
maybe it's multifaceted.
I'm wondering,
I think that now that, sorry, light bulbs just went off in my head, I think that would make sense then. Enhance the corridor's built environment by visually improving the intersection between private development and public space. I mean, it does suggest that it's sort of, you know, it's a give and take, a back and forth, but that ultimately the goal is to improve the public space.
But to avoid confusion,
but I
can we
still
use a
feel
different
like,
word?
I still feel like we are modifying the wrong thing. Are we visually improving the intersection? Are we visually improving the built relation to? Or are we visually improving the public space? What's our goal? Our goal is to visually improve the public space through an intersection or a relationship, or through recognizing, you know, obviously that there is some private area and some public area that collides somehow.
About the
I'm not going to say all that in the goal.
junction.
There's
The
a
junction.
but I think the real thing is we're visually improving the public space. Like, that's our goal. But we do need to take into account the
And we-
private.
And we will set regulations on the private space. I mean, we will say, this is your landscaping requirement, this is your setback
Yes.
requirement, this is your tree requirement, this is your
Yes.
materials or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
You know, going full circle, I'm probably landing back on relationship, but
But can we move public space closer to what it should be modifying, what visually improving should be modifying?
the relationship,
Enhance the corridor's built environment by visually improving the public space
Through a relationship with private
through a
development.
relationship with private development.
That sounds good.
Even the public space relationship, the
With
public
private.
space intersection. I don't know.
Well-
I don't like it.
Let me point out this, though. I mean, regardless of what we call it in the headline, I mean, if you look at the second sentence that he's included here, it is the intention of the SMSC plan to contextually influence the physical and visual relationship of private versus public space along the
Yes.
corridor by creating a neighborhood-style scheme, right? I mean, I think that he gets at
Yes.
what we're talking about there in that second sentence. So maybe we can let Corey listen to this and
Yeah.
make some suggestions on how to maybe reword that slightly.
And we could even just use the word relation. The physical and visual relation of public versus private space.
And Corey, when you listen to this, maybe you get out the thesaurus and
I don't know,
see
Corey,
what
just
other
figure out
words.
if it's a misplaced modifier, figure that out, figure out if we need a thesaurus, whatever.
Any
Sorry to-
conceptual problems with breaking it down into traffic sector, pedestrian sector, development sector? That
Nope,
made sense to me, but
Perfect, yeah.
I think that's perfect. I was wondering how Kevin felt about the first sentence of A.
You mean that it serves cars, trucks, buses, bicycles, and mass transit?
And any type of mass transit. I thought you for sure were going to call that.
Yeah, I saw that, and I thought about that, but yeah, I thought about that.
Just say transit.
I think
And any type of transit.
Just get rid of any type of mass and just say and transit. Because that's buses, realistically.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do that. I did actually look at that, any type of mass transit, and kind of think,
I was thinking of taking out and any type of. I mean, any type of, and just doing and mass transit.
Yeah, if you just say transit or mass transit, I think that gets rid of the suggestion that like, we're gonna do anything.
We're going to do any type.
maybe and other transit to suggest that, again, it's sort of along the
Perfect.
same lines of
Yep.
cars, trucks, buses, bicycles, but we're not talking about necessarily light rail.
any type of transit,
So
including scooters and
other types
Bird.
of transit, is that what we're going with?
Yeah.
any type of transit. That's what I would say.
I would suggest and maybe
Other.
and other forms of transit.
And other forms of transit. Fine. Same, yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
All right, let's move on to the objective under 4A1. So let's look first at the priority roadway design stipulations. I did like to see that Corey had in here the bike lane, the 6-foot bike lane. I think that that's a really good suggestion.
Did we decide there's room for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full
had-
6 feet?
We had the Wasatch Front Regional Council guy, alternative transit, what was his name?
Well, yeah, I remember, that was a long time ago, right, that he came and talked about
Yeah.
that? And we measured out, so if you say 11-foot center lane, 2 travel lanes at 12 feet, so now we're at 35 feet. We still have 12 feet.
I don't know if we had a full 6-foot on all areas, but I do remember him saying for sure that we could go down to 11 feet, or I even think he said, at least he was saying we could go to even narrower than 11 feet, but I think we were saying, oh, we can do 11 feet.
Or do we mean here maybe 1 6-foot bike lane, or or are we talking about 2 6-foot bike lanes?
On
So-
either side.
One on each side, or just one?
So the bike lanes aren't 6 feet. The bike lanes are typically 3 to 4 feet, but it says at the minimum provide a 6-foot shoulder, if not a bike lane.
Okay, but
That's the
also,
difference.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, along those lines, to be clear, I think that the white lines that they just painted on Main Street after they redid it, those are technically for a shoulder, not for a bike lane, right?
Right.
But,
But they at least give cars a view of, oh,
it frames
this
the
is a
road.
lane.
It frames the road,
And bikes a
yeah.
little bit of a view of like, oh, this is in the lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd get rid of the 6 foot though. I just measured Main Street's like 44, 45,
I think 44 is what we talked
Yeah.
about before. That rings a bell.
and 46 is what you'd need if you go 6, 6, 12, 11, and 11. So anyway, I'd probably just say get rid of that 6 number so you don't confuse anyone, and then just keep bike lanes / shoulders.
What if we put where possible, provide a 6-foot
Yeah.
shoulder?
Perfect.
Because I do think that if one of our goals is to slow down traffic along Main Street, making that a tiny bit narrower would help with that,
Yeah.
even
I
if it
like
is just a
that.
visual white lane.
where possible is better than at minimum.
So can we talk about slowing down Main Street?
Yeah, you really want it to just go fast.
Well, listen, we've talked, it's been a long time since we talked about this, but this is something that I think we've all talked about, right? Like, Main Street is the main road through Centerville. It is,
Other than I-15.
thank you, other than I-15, it is the main artery of Centerville, right?
And
It's-
Legacy.
No, legacies are.
I'm just kidding.
We've got a few main.
We've got Orchard, we've got
No, but
200
listen,
West.
no, but listen, other than I-15, Logan, Main Street is the only road that goes from the south border to the north border completely uninterrupted.
Yeah.
Everything else cuts off somewhere, turns somewhere, you gotta jog here or there. Even the frontage road doesn't really do it. Like, you gotta cut through and.
Frontage Road doesn't work. 4th East doesn't work. 2nd West works to the end of
Up north to just above. like-
Reading.
Yeah.
So technically, we do go a little bit past.
But anyway, my
Reading
point is,
technically.
Main Street is the only road, other than I-15, that goes from
Yes.
north to south through the whole city. And so it is the main artery of Centerville. So the concern there is that, do we want to, how much cholesterol do we want on our artery? Do we want to clog that up or not? And the other thing too is, we've talked about how UDOT set speed limits, right? It's almost like, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. They set it based on
How fast people are
actual
going.
behavior.
Which is so funny because every time I go on Main Street, people are driving 30 miles an hour. Every time. I actually don't use Main Street because it seems to me that people usually go slower on Main Street than they do on 2nd West
They go slow.
and 4th East.
I think it depends on the part of Main Street that, in my experience anyway, like certainly once you get, and I know this is outside of the scope of this here, but once you get north of,
Parish,
well, yeah, Parish and especially Genesee Stewart,
yeah.
speed picks up there.
Well, and so this is specifically the area where people generally go slower. And that's one little area.
I just, well, part of my thing here, okay, so part of my thing is, we can say that we want the speed limit to be 30 to 40, but we know that the way that UDOT sets the speed limit is based on behavior. So I don't know, are we trying to say, we're not trying to say we want the speed limit to be this, we're just trying to say we want the actual speed to be that?
Yeah, if we decide that we want to slow it down, I think that this item being in here strengthens the rest of the design decisions we might say. So if we say, let's widen bike lanes, let's add more mass on the street somehow, whether that's through landscaping or other means, that this kind of strengthens the argument and makes the plan more consistent and cohesive if we want to, in fact, slow down Main Street.
Well, I don't know that we necessarily want to slow down Main Street from end to end,
Yeah.
but travel speeds throughout this area of Main Street, if our goal is to support local business, to support safety of users in this area, and there's a lot of turning in and turning out and getting to the city hall and getting to the post office and going to here and there, it's different. It's a lot different than once you go past north of Parish Lane.
Yeah.
People are going to go faster because they don't have as many ins and outs until there's an actual street or a few houses that are on, obviously, Main Street. But the area that we're looking at right now, the South Main Street corridor area, is in fact the area that, if we're trying to support local businesses and we're trying to think of it as our soft commercial area, we don't want people going 40 miles an hour when other one's trying to turn out, and you can't actually turn onto the street because people are going so fast.
Yeah. I think in the end, I think I can support the way that it's written to say that speeds ought to be between 30 to 40 miles per hour. I mean, the speed limit, I imagine, will probably stay 40 because at certain times of the day, people are going to go 40
Yeah.
plus, right? And so UDOT will measure 40 plus and average it all out and say, keep it at 40. But after having the discussion, and I think it's important to have the discussion, I I'm just glad it doesn't say that travel speeds ought to be 30 miles an
25.
hour. Yeah, 25, 30
Yeah.
miles an hour, because I don't think that that's really going to work. But I could support where it says 32, 40 miles per hour. But
Keeps that 40 option in there.
keeps a 40 option in there.
Well, and
Yeah. And
honestly, I don't want it to be 25. I don't think, most people, when they hit a 25 mile an hour zone, they're like, 25 mile an hour. So it doesn't feel appropriate for the area that it is such a big artery. But at the same time, given the makeup of what is on that section of Main Street, I feel like it could be very appropriate to have it go a little bit slower.
Yeah, but right, a little bit slower, I think it'd be okay. But let's also think about this. If you're coming from north end of Centerville and maybe you're headed to Bountiful, if you know that when you get into this part of Main Street, Centerville right here, the speeds are going to slow down a lot. You're going to cut off at Chase Lane, you're going to turn up at Parish Lane, and you're going to head along 4th East or something like that, and you're going to completely circumvent this whole area, which in a little bit, in some ways, defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do here.
Right.
So we need to be careful about not killing what we're trying to do by
Right.
doing some of this stuff. So that's why I think the 3240 is acceptable, kind of a compromise to say, yeah, if we slow it down a little bit, but not too much, because we don't want to force the traffic off
Yeah.
the corridor. So, anyway, another idea is that we could hire junior high kids to pretend like they're going to dart out into traffic, and that'll slow the traffic down.
The traffic, I honestly feel like the traffic
Objective
is
number C.
already. is
Don't put that in there.
Already slowed down. I actually feel like, I really do feel like the traffic is already slowed down, but
Yeah.
All right, I think that we've adequately debated speed limits, so I'm going to suggest that we move on. Thank you for the discussion.
Yeah, no problem.
Priority signing stipulations. So on this, at least my thought was with regard to traffic management and control, where Corey recommends the support structures like poles and frames for signs ought to be enhanced to create a traditional Main Street or historic visual aspect. I was wondering if like this is an area where we could really do something cool that would not be very expensive, but that would create a real feeling of cohesiveness along Main Street. And that would be to have some unique like street signs that run just along Main Street for the little cross sections, right? That are very uniquely like some historical type feel that look a little different than every other sign in the
Rest of the city.
But if you just run it from, you know, the top of the Main Street area to the bottom where we're talking about, that might really create a cool,
Section.
cohesive look. And it really wouldn't be, I think, that expensive. So,
I like that. Also, I don't know if this is the actual area to bring this up, and I bring it up. You have dog parks.
oh yes.
I would love to see hanging pots, and you can get them that self-water. I've had number of residents tell me that when I talk about Main Street. I've heard that a couple times about, oh, we should do something to those ugly poles. What about hanging pots? What about flowers that are happening, that are blooming in the middle? Obviously, there's maintenance for that as far as like putting that in, but it's a small area. You can get them self-watering, like I said, that it's very minimal upkeep once they're actually planted. And they make a huge visual impact on an area.
To me, that is like an ultimate wish list, but I don't think that it's likely to be a reality. I think that it's much more likely that we could create some of that sort of visual effect through what Corey suggested, the banners and things,
Yep.
in a way that would be more maintenance friendly. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think that the hanging plants are absolutely gorgeous, but I worry from a maintenance perspective, even if we could get them to self-water and do all of that, I guess I could see the city council pushing back on that piece, and I think that they might get more on board with banner signs, something that we could do that's colorful, that, you know, would kind of create the same idea.
If you're looking for historical visual impact, hanging pots, small town,
Oh, yeah.
older historical, I'm just saying that is it.
Yeah,
sure.
Becky, I think, I agree. I think we should add, I think it would fit under better on 4B4, priority streetscape feature stipulations. Talking about utility poles and lines, which they
That's
probably be
the
attached
part.
to.
Yeah.
Banners and flags, public art.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see an item on there, maybe in the banners and flags section, or just a Ford. I mean, as long as we're just putting it on, this is kind of.
They
this
can
isn't
always
hardcore
take it off.
ordinance, and this could guide it. And we may find that that's a very cost-effective solution. It could be $40 a thing, and you're
Yeah.
talking $500 for the whole thing. And if it's maintenance, is you just,
Plan it at the beginning of the season.
yeah, take it down once a year. I know Parks Department doesn't do crap in the winter. Just kidding. Bruce?
Careful.
Ooh, those are fighting words.
No, they do the lights. I lied.
Seen the lights?
Yeah, it was a joke. It was a joke.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'd say add it to 4B4 as a number 4, Corey. Even if Shaylin doesn't want it.
Oh,
Corey?
Here's the thing, I kind of echo a
Come on,
little
I
bit.
support your dog parks. Come on, give me my thing.
I did say I loved the idea.
But here's the thing, I think that that kind of puts, it feels like that's putting us back into a situation where we were a couple of years ago when we were talking about a lot of the streetscape, whatever, improvements, benches and whatever else. And it was kind of like, okay, at what point do we say, maybe that's a little bit too much, you know? And that's why we came
How
up.
is that? I'm just wondering, okay, just explain to me the process that makes hanging pots a lofty goal. Why is that such a lofty goal?
It's not, Becky. I'm going to support you. Like, if I have to do a 10-foot setback, or you take 10 feet of frontage, and I'm paying $17 a square foot for that land, plus all the hardscape in there, I mean, I'm gonna clear $10,000, $20,000 in a jiffy that you're gonna extract from landowners through stuff like that. I think this is right in line with flags and sign changes.
And the
So you're
amount of
saying-
support from the community for our Main Street flags, to me, really signals that they want something that gives some sort of beauty along that road.
So I agree. I love the Main Street flags. I love that. That definitely, in my mind, gives a feel that, hey, we're in Centerville. This is, you know, something, we're festive, right? And it's a good use of well as well of those ugly poles.
Right.
But so, do you feel like this could be used in addition to those flags? Like, would this hang off the bottom of where the flag is, or something like that?
I don't know the details of it per se, but I do think that having it as an option for that specific area would be really cool.
Why don't we? Well, okay, then here. Sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead, because I have a suggestion, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, I was going to say, why don't we add it in there, and then we are going to talk to the city council very soon, and maybe let's make sure we talk about it with the city council very soon and see how, you know, they feel about that type of thing, and if, you know, they come out just like, this is the worst idea we've ever heard of, which I'm not saying that they will, but, you know, maybe they'll be like, hey, this is the best thing we've ever seen. Great idea.
My suggestion is going to be to treat this idea a lot like we're treating the residential option, which is, I would envision when we give this to the city council, there may be sections
Sure.
that are bracketed, right? Where it's like, here's our recommendation, and then you get to a bracketed section, and that bracketed section indicates that the planning commission had some
Disagreement.
Yep. Right? It was not sure that this, it's not like everybody is on board, but it's a thought, and you guys as the city council can decide it.
Sure.
So then it doesn't feel quite so much like they're just shooting down everything that we've put up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that. I like that idea.
I don't mind including it in that context.
Sure.
I like
So,
that.
I mean,
I would also like to hear from our other commissioners who are not here,
Yeah.
how they feel about it, because that might be, there may or may not be more support for it or less.
it would be absolutely beautiful. But I think maybe I'm more skeptical that it will happen. I think that a banner idea might be a lot more
We should
achievable.
put it on a survey and send it out to the residents. See what they say.
The survey is when the public gets to come and talk to us about,
Well, then put it in and see what they say.
yeah, bracket it. We'll bracket it in.
Mackenzie, could you give me just a little bit more context about wayfinding? I mean, when I first read that, I was thinking like, you know, some rock that says, this is this many miles this way, and this is this many miles this way, and I thought, no, that's not what that is, but what exactly would wayfinding be?
Entail. So it
Yeah.
can include distances to things, but it could also include, the parish sign saying parish marketplace this way, a park's here, cemeteries that direction, but also it can include more bike lane information, pedestrian crossings.
Oh, trails information.
Trails information, yeah.
That'd be
stuff
cool.
like that.
Well, and I think also that it would match that feel that you're talking about for street signs. Maybe you mirror the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
font, design,
Smaller.
whatever type of thing. Say the cemetery's up this way, but it looks like that. Looks cool.
I personally am very ambivalent to wayfinding.
I think it's great. It's also, I think, similar to,
You like being
Hold on,
lost.
what is ambivalent? Is that?
I don't really have an
Meh.
opinion either way.
Okay.
It's just
Yeah.
meh.
but I know later we're talking about, and he talked about, last meeting, we talked more about like, this is the center of Centerville, or, something.
I did like that idea.
Remember how we talked about that? I think this is this on that same vein of like, there's another area though, I'm forgetting. Let's see. There was another area that he wrote about in here that talks about that, but I can't remember. We'll get to it, I'm sure. But that I think it's related to wayfinding, is that you have like, you are now.
It doesn't sound like to me that anybody else had any real strong feelings for or against that one. So I think we can leave that one as is. Anyone had any concerns with trying to limit on-street parking?
Nope.
No on-street parking.
No.
Pedestrian sector.
Yeah, this is
With
where
regard to
the
any of
two
these.
questions that I kind of brought up.
Yeah.
So Mackenzie, what are your thoughts, all of you, on those?
I forgot your comments. What?
The sidewalk width with the decorative frame that goes on on the two sides, and then the park strip material.
Well, I don't know that I have thoughts about either one of those. When I first read this and I saw 4 feet sidewalks, I thought, what? I don't want a 4-foot sidewalk. And then I realized that you could put the 12 inches on either side. It really did create a 6-foot sidewalk, which I love the idea of. I don't particularly like the dark stain idea. And maybe I'm just going back to what the fire chief said in connection with how tough that is to maintain. That while it could be really very visually cool, I think that from a maintenance standpoint, that's asking an awful lot, and we could achieve kind of the same feel, but by just maybe on that 12-inch strip, do a decorative just pattern or even brush strokes or something just to kind of differentiate it a little.
The pressed
Stamped
or
concrete?
stamped, yeah. That's cheaper, right?
Yeah, or just when you lay it, you can stroke it out.
Right, just
Yeah.
stroke it, like, seriously, just take the brush and across, right? It would not be expensive, but it would create a visual impact,
Yeah.
but not
But
with dark.
Corey's talked about colored concrete in the past. Isn't there colored concrete that does work better than others? Or
Well, I
is it
think the
always?
main thing with the colored concrete, obviously, if you recall, was that the weight of the trucks.
Right.
That was the main thing. It's not necessarily maintenance of colored concrete per se. It's maintenance of colored concrete with thousands of pounds rolling over them on a frequent basis. That was his issue,
So-
not that they're inherently maintenance problematic.
But for the most part, we're talking about sidewalks here, which
That's
will
what I'm saying.
only interact with vehicles in certain locations.
Right.
But
And not
even
1,000-pound
So, explain to me, remind me how weight or color affects durability of concrete?
From what I recall, I don't know, you guys can help me out, but
Yeah.
from what I recall, it was that the actual color that is mixed into the concrete breaks down the strength of the concrete, and that multiple repetitions over it peels off or something, the
That could
top
be.
layer.
That could also be a little more applicable just to the fire station because those huge fetching trucks. that
That's
go
what I
in and out.
think. I
But-
think it's mainly because of those trucks.
Although if you have it running the length of your main street and you have all of the cut-ins where businesses are and you have cars driving over some parts of it a lot, I could see there being an issue. I guess from my cost benefit analysis, I would rather require property owners to take money and do something in a different place than trying to put money into making color concrete. To me, the easiest answer is just you throw a little bit of brush stroking on the side, it creates that visual element, gives you your 6-foot sidewalk, and
And then you hang a potted plant, and then you're good.
And then you're
I
good.
think that's a great idea. That's an awesome idea.
So that's my,
What
that
if
was my
we,
thought
what
for
if we
whatever.
said instead of, so it says dark stain and surface brush. So I think it gives the option, right?
Well, it says dark stain and.
Oh, let's do or. Or,
I would just take out dark stain altogether. We want it to be consistent. I don't want like a patch of color and then a patch of not, then a patch of color and then a patch of not. That would look weird.
Yeah, I agree. I just
Sure.
should get rid of that EG.
yeah, perfect. Should we just take that out?
Sure.
I would leave in the surface brush because again, I think that that's super easy and it will clarify what we mean by
Okay.
framing strip.
Can we put in stamped as well?
Yeah, I would be okay with stamped or surface brush.
For example, stamped or surface brush.
Yeah.
You get the same patchiness.
Exactly.
Well, you wouldn't get the same patchiness because visually, from if you squint your eyes from far away, you're not going to see like patchy, you know, like. Do you know what I'm saying?
Everything looks great if you squint your eyes.
Yes, I mean, but I'm saying like, if you go like this and you look at the colored concrete, it would look patchy. But
I'd
if
like-
you kind of just like go like this, it doesn't
I'd
matter
like to
if
eliminate
it's-
section 4 and just say, just squint your eyes.
Just squint. Mackenzie, with regards to Becky's earlier comment, I think that if, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think your main concern is that west side, because that west side, it already abuts right up next to
Yeah.
Main Street.
no
So
park
and there's absolutely no park strip. But the way that I read this is that when that west side starts developing, the expectation is going to be that as they develop it, they will start putting in these park strips so that it will force a park strip into the sidewalk. So eventually you'll have park strips down both sides.
That's how I understand it as well.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the east side, as they're redeveloping, they don't necessarily have to replace the whole sidewalk. It would allow them to do the hard surface framing strip on
Right.
that side in some cases. And then on the west side, it would be a different situation. Okay, so that's fine. The question I also had was the park strip materials. How do you feel about those?
I really liked the requirement that it has to be something other than hardscaping. And that's more of a feel issue for me. I think that's why we don't like the feel of the west side, because it's all hard materials. And why instinctively to me, the east side feels better.
Is being hardscaping?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think it's included in that, but depends on the size of the,
Gravel, if it's like really small versus larger
Right.
rocks, might be considered hardscaping.
right.
The larger the rock, the more
The lo-
likely it is to be hardscaping.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't love that area, that section, I'll be honest with you. I feel like the reality is we live in a desert and encouraging, I know that people like park strips, but if you're looking at a maintenance situation, they are a lot of maintenance, there are a lot of water cost, not just cost, but water usage. It's not, to me, I feel like when we have a problem and we just continue to perpetuate the problem by saying it must be turf in an area that very few people are going to utilize. I guess you would utilize it for the parade, so that's true. You would use it. You could utilize it for the parade. I don't know. I just think we should think about that, and I would feel like I didn't do my job if I didn't say that.
What about zero? I don't even know if I'm saying this right. Xeriscaping, right? I mean, because right now this says turf, shrubs, and essentially trees,
Right.
which would take out that option. But if you wanted to do some really water conscious, but otherwise still natural looking something, that might be an option.
Right. I think that would totally be an option. I think we should, as a city, encourage people to make water-conscious decisions that are in line with reality.
I would be interested to know whether this does include that idea of, so well, it's actually it was on our agenda today.
Yeah.
We'll still circle back around to this, but like what they did where the H2O store is, right? With the rocks and then the plants that will cover the 70%. I noticed when I drive into Salt Lake on, what's that main road? When you take Beck Street and you go all the way to North Temple. Third West. So they, right there on Third West and North Temple, they've put in a whole new condominium. It's beautiful. But I noticed that in their strip there, is exactly that same idea. It's smaller rocks.
Yeah.
But it's all rocks and then those same daylily plants that they just planted a whole bunch of them along the way. And I bet that they look really cool when they all, when they start actually growing.
Well, and there's a road, I'm getting turned around. I think it's First North going east from Main Street. It might not be First, but there's a home. So there's the car dealership, and if you turn and the car wash. If you turn up that street, I believe there's a home on the east corner that has beautifully decorated, beautifully done their park strip in a way that is not really xeriscaping, but it's using plantings and native plantings, it's looking like, that are just beautiful. It's beautiful, and it looks like it's not a maintenance issue, because if you use native water-wise plantings, it technically is xeriscaping, but it's not like straight rocks or straight anything. You can still have a really natural look that is consistent with the area that we live in.
So I would be okay adding to this park strip materials the concept of xeriscaping, or I don't even know what you call it, but the rock with the plants that cover 75% of the area, right? A little bit of rock poking through is fine, but if you can do it with a couple of big plants that don't take up a lot of water, that would work for me too.
I think as long as we add ideas, let's add stuff to it, not just take out turf. If people want to put turf in,
Oh yeah, I agree.
let's let them put turf in. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, I was just trying to find out if hardscaping was considered gravel. Gravel is considered hardscape. But I just learned xeriscaping is having nothing. Xera, X-E-R-I, scaping. Xeriscaping, which I have a master's degree in planning and I'm just learning this, but xeriscaping is when you have drought-tolerant vegetation that can survive.
So I've always said xeriscape, and when people say xeroscape, I thought they were mispronouncing it, but it's
Which is
interesting
stupid.
to know
Yeah,
that there's
yeah.
two different types.
Yeah, so xeriscaping is where you have nothing,
Well, I don't want that.
and then xeriscaping is drought-tolerant.
So let's use,
See, look, I
do you
even
like
wrote it down as
xeriscaping more?
Xera, xeriscaping, so
Wow, it's XERI, sorry, but
I was so close,
XERI.
so close.
holy mackerel.
How do you all feel about the XER?
I'm in
I-
favor of allowing it.
Okay,
Let's add it.
let's
Yeah.
add.
I think
Maybe
so.
we can say something like, park strip areas ought to consist predominantly of plantings such as turf, shrubs, xeriscape, or should we say something like native plants or water-wise plants?
Is that
Yeah, I
covered by
think that-
xeriscaping?
I think that's covered in xeriscaping.
I know. I'm saying, do you want to say xeriscape, or do you want to say native, or do you want to say water-wise?
I like xeriscaping.
Okay.
Xeriscaping.
And then continue, and where appropriate, the rest of the sentence?
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay.
I like it.
And then, so we are definitely saying hard surface should be prohibited when we are currently reviewing theirs has hardscaping.
I personally would say it should be prohibited except where it's integrated with the plaza, or in circumstances like the one that we talked about where the planting is able to cover 75% of
Yeah.
the
So should we say
hardscaping.
that, or in places where the planting is able to cover?
Does it count as hardscaping if the plantings are covering 75%?
Maybe it's not.
I don't know.
I don't
That's a
think
great
so.
question for Corey.
Well, because the first time we talked about this, the one we're talking about later, the first time we talked about that, Corey talked about how if the even though the plant comes out of the ground in a,
Who is that?
We would like to note that our own Steve Thacker is walking through, giving us a presence.
Steve Thacker.
Helmet to rotaries.
So Corey talked about, even if the plant, like, even if the trunk comes out of the ground in a 4 foot or 4 inch spot, but it canopies
Yeah,
out, then you
yeah, yeah.
count the canopy.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe
Maybe we're okay leaving it without.
I think you'd leave
let's
it.
suggest to
Hard
Corey
surfacing.
when he watches this to help us come up with something that matches our desires.
Yeah. Make it work, Corey, make it work.
You know what we're saying.
You just do it to Mackenzie and just tell Corey that that's what we said. Too.
All right, I
Yes.
can do that.
There you go.
Okay. We're having great discussion, and I don't want to stop great discussion, but I also want to make sure that we're getting through stuff tonight. So if anyone, if we're good on sidewalk and on park strip stipulations, any discussion about what Corey has proposed here for streetscape lighting?
No, and I think the bollard type is, if I'm thinking correctly, it's a little bit lower. Is that correct? Which I think is great because that actually speaks to light pollution of the surrounding neighborhood houses who probably don't want to have a really bright light. I want to just make sure that we can still adequately see with cars. So that would be my only suggestion, is making sure that we can still see vehicle traffic can still see. But I like that it may be lower also for pedestrian and other types of traffic, so that because sometimes when you have car traffic lights, it just hits the street and it doesn't actually hit the sidewalk, which can be a safety issue. So I like the idea of a slightly shorter pole or bollard or whatever.
Right, I like it.
I have to admit, I'm not a fan of the bollard idea. I'm just not. And maybe that's just because in my head I'm thinking, if we want a historic feel, bollard doesn't feel historic to me. Bollard feels very
You can get a
modern.
historic bollard. can't
So I envision it more of like the just along this, again, one strip of Main Street. I mean, put in the cool, like old-fashioned-y looking lights, right? That give it a nice feel. Bollard just, I don't know. I know you guys like
So we
bollards.
have
I
the
know Corey likes
banner,
bollard.
the hanging plant,
Yeah.
and the old-fashioned looking light all
No,
together.
you have the old-fashioned-y looking light from which a flag hangs, and then you're good to go. I'm just saying, if I had my wish list, that's,
I mean, you do bring up a good point that bollards aren't really very old-fashioned-y, unless somebody can show a good old-fashioned-y bollard.
I mean, I just pulled up a couple while we were talking, and I'm sorry, these things look like things you would find outside of a security facility. But, so I'm not loving
This
them,
looks
but.
like- Those look historic.
Yeah, but look at the one on the right. See how it's cute and it like folds over and it looks old-fashioned? Anyway, I mean, I don't have strong feelings about
To me,
this
it
one.
seems like it's kind of is it more of a globe? I don't know.
Any interest in suggesting? Never mind.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't actually support increasing the regulatory environment on the, so it was an idea like if it was my house, but I don't want to put it in the code, so I take it back.
I mean, I don't feel strongly enough to.
How about this? What if right now, for a second, we keep it, but we put in the word historic design or
Right.
historic styled?
Yeah.
Look, these aren't lighting bollards,
But those are cool.
but these are some old-fashioned-y
Yeah.
looking bollards. I'm sure you could find some old-fashioned-y looking lighting
Yeah.
bollards.
I think you could.
Okay, but if we're gonna do it that way, then I support what Becky is saying, and that we should put it in saying that they need to have a historic feel.
Okay.
Or historic look.
Yeah, they've
Yes.
got it. They can't be like some modern.
So let's add in wherever it says lighting style ought to be of the bollard type, maybe say lighting style ought to be of the historically styled bollard. I don't know,
Yeah, or
something
the-
like that.
Bollard type with a historic feel.
Yeah.
Corey, just massage that.
Great.
Okay. Priority streetscape feature stipulations. We've already talked about the self-watering plants. We've talked about the whole specific banner system. What did you guys think about the public art option?
I think it's fine. It looks good.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say
The-
that. I feel like I talk first every time. I love the idea.
Well,
I think it's so cool.
I look at the mural that they did on
Yeah.
that one building there on the corner with the white, and it is gorgeous, and it really, I think, adds to that
Yeah.
part of
And it
of Main
and it
Street.
draws people in.
Yeah,
It does.
It does.
And you can say, you know, like he said, the public art plan, I could see people totally getting all over that in our community, being on the public art committee and helping, you know, bring a sense of community to our area and a sense of unity and togetherness that could be brought about by doing stuff together as the public. I think it's a great idea.
I read an article, and I wanted to say it was in Salt Lake. A school district got together, and they had kids design pictures, and then they picked some and they wrapped the book depositories by libraries
fun.
with the kids' art, and it looks really cool. So I could see us. I think that it would help create a more cohesive community feel, particularly if you know, we're using things that people have contributed, right? Then
Right.
they sort of have this buy-in to it's now
Ours.
our Main Street.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing to think about too is that Corey suggested quite a simple way for us to do it that way. He's not asking for us to put in an installation of horses that are all designed like in Ogden, or buffalo that are all designed like in Logan. Those are still really cool, and when you are along those streets, you feel like, oh, I'm in this area, and my kids love to find all the different buffalo, and they love to find all the different horses whenever we drive along there. So this is an easy way to, like he said, wrapping maybe the utility boxes, which, does it say specifically? I don't think it does say utility, but the public art plan could, you know, address that. There's ways to achieve that don't have to be super cost intense, but could be really cool.
Yeah. It says part of enhancing utility service infrastructure.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I think the idea would be that the public art plan would sort of have a cohesive view of the whole thing that we wouldn't have to really worry about.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Development sector.
I'm getting really excited about this, guys. Is
This
anyone
is
else
the-
getting excited?
This was one of the funnest parts to do, I think.
This
the
is really
design-
fun.
The design side. So public development sector, so let's talk about 4C1. I will say that with regard to parking lot screening, I like the idea of having a buffer between the parking lot and the street. I don't love the idea that it could be just a concrete wall.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That's something that I thought about, and two things. One, I really do think it needs to be limited to headlight height, like it says.
Yep.
And so instead of saying ought to be provided up to a height okay, that sentence needs to be reworked a little bit, but up to a headlight height, maybe maybe we need to say something along the lines of it shouldn't be any higher than a headlight height of a parked vehicle.
I think up to a headlight height is
Do we want
adequate.
a minimum there though? Up to, so if I put like a little row of peonies across the bottom, now I've like satisfied that because it's technically a buffer feature.
Peonies
Yeah.
get pretty tall.
Pansies, she's thinking of pansies.
Oh, you're thinking
I am
pansies.
probably thinking of pansies.
No, that's a good point. I think we need to, so maybe we need to talk about in that section,
Yeah.
a,
Well, what is headlight height though? You have to actually think about that. That's going to be quite different at like a big
I know,
old jacked
every
truck
Yeah.
compared to a little Civic.
Between 24 and 54 inches, just settle it like 3 feet and just say,
I think that's a good idea.
rather than say headlight height, let's just say 3 feet. That blocks most headlights. And
Yeah.
And then you've got it consistent, then you don't have like this happening.
So then you say a screening feature of 3 feet.
Let's say
Yeah,
approximately. Is that okay?
Does approximately get us in trouble with
The
enforcement?
only thing I don't want people to do is to feel so inhibited by, I have to have this 3-foot screen, and there is some difference of height in
Yeah,
my
so
area.
you plant a hedge there, and the hedge could vary,
Go,
right?
yeah, you want to have the flexibility as a property owner that I'm like not sitting there worrying about. I have this like exact straight 3 foot, so I think
3
Okay.
foot plus or minus 6 inches.
approximately.
So then you might as well just say 30 to 42 inches.
Or the average headlight height is 24 to 54, so you could say that too. Meaning when I just Googled it, it said 24 to
He's
54.
saying approximately 3 feet. I don't think people are going to be like,
Okay, approximately. This is not the.
this is not the final draft.
Yeah, think about that, Corey. Do a little Googling.
Figure that out.
And just remember,
Yeah.
this is the general plan.
The
these are
general
not your
plan.
zoning regulations.
Yeah.
Yes.
True.
Well,
That's right.
Approximate headlight height is great then for general.
Perfect. And I like,
Oh, but back to what?
Yeah.
Sorry, not a cement wall, right? Like.
right.
We're thinking greenery, right? I mean, something.
Well, you could have a really cool, like, sort of,
White picket fence.
well, you could have a cool
Yeah, I'd be
fence,
okay
or
with
you
a
could have a
fence.
cool, like, slightly raised concrete with then some stuff on top. I don't know. You don't have to, I don't think you want to limit that.
To just green.
I don't think people are going to, like, just put up a cement wall. Do you think they will?
Yes.
Do you think that's cheaper than plantings?
No.
It requires less thought and
maintenance.
maintenance.
So
No,
I would probably say a
you could have
fence.
someone try to stick it to you, but I think 3 foot walls, that's a lot.
But don't
of
you think that's
concrete.
going to make their place look ugly?
Yeah.
There
but-
isn't- yeah.
Okay, so maybe,
If it were me, I would say a fence or
Okay.
shrub, right? So that you kind of have, maybe you can have a mix of things, but I don't love the idea of a wall.
I don't want a wall, but I just think we need to be careful not to over specify,
Sure.
you know. I don't know.
Maybe it's unlikely enough that people would put up an ugly wall that we don't have to worry about.
I didn't think that when he said buffer feature.
I don't know. Maybe Corey would have a good idea for us on how to
The
avoid the
verbiage.
cement wall.
Okay.
I'm just thinking like in and out. They did, not that I think that it's necessarily
They're
bad
like
looking,
brick with the
but it's like
concrete
the,
topper.
yeah, I mean, it's like a
Oh, yeah,
eerie
you're
or,
right.
Okay.
So do you want to just suggest some language for that?
I would say shrubs or fence, but
What do you guys think?
Yes.
Good luck, Corey.
Good luck,
Chicken.
Corey.
chicken.
Okay, well, let's add that in and we can look at it later if we need to.
Anything else on this one with regard to the landscape depth fronting public street stipulation?
No.
I, street tree planting depth, they said, so they're not saying, oh yeah, never mind.
Yeah, they're not saying no trees.
Okay. No, I know, but we already talked about trees
Yeah.
Yeah.
earlier, so never mind.
Anything on lighting stipulations?
No.
Do you want to add, does it say bollard, pedestrian, bollards of
Yeah,
historical
the same.
style?
But this is, do we want to include that in the development sector as well, or do we really only care about the bollards in the pedestrian sector?
No, the 4C2. Oh, wait, where's the other one?
Well, that was on 4B.
Yeah, this is the stuff, as I understand it.
We
that's
already
gonna be
added
on
that in the
on
4B3.
Yeah, we've got
buildings.
the stuff in the 4B3 too. Now we're
Yes.
into the development sector. So do we care how they do their lighting in the development
I mean,
sector?
it already has in the freestanding lighting section that if outdoor lighting is used, pedestrian, bollard, and landscape lighting is preferred for the
Okay.
corridor. So I think that that's consistent.
Sure.
I would still put the same language
The
there.
historical feel.
Yeah, just so that it's consistent. There's some consistency. And it says to enhance the neighborhood style scheme. So, I mean, I guess that's sort of part
To
of it
enhance a
too.
historic
And how-
neighborhood in there.
There you go.
How does that one look?
That's cool.
That's kind of cool.
Let's,
All right, I could get on
And it's
board with
LED,
bollards.
even.
Corey, they've managed to convince me even without you here.
okay, so maybe instead of that, you could just say for the corridor to enhance an historic neighborhood style scheme.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Perfect.
Anything about signs? Be okay with fixing those to business walls? eliminating freestanding ones.
So on that, I was reading that business wall signs one, obviously, we ought to create a differentiation from the typical box style commercial. So we're not just looking for boring old boxes, but we got to do something. I don't know, do we want to throw something with a
think
historical feel in here? Do we want to,
I think so. That'd be cool. Think about that.
do we want to encourage painted signs? How do we differentiate those from murals?
I hadn't even thought about the walls, the sign idea adding to the historic feel, but that's a great idea, Kevin.
You could try to encourage consistent materials or design is what we're thinking of doing with the street signs.
Yeah.
Maybe my only concern is that if we go too historical, yes, I want it to feel historical, but also I don't want to feel like I'm going to the 1800s as I drive down the street. So I don't mind some, like I want a good mixture of new and old. And so I could see a really cool, like older looking style with a really slick kind of modern sign on it to give it some pizzazz.
Maybe
So-
what he has is appropriate because he
Yeah.
says business signing ought to be simplified and scaled down to reflect a local small town style scheme. The style, colors, materials ought to complement the architectural design of the buildings associated with the
That's
sign.
what I was just going to say. So
Yeah, so I
just leave
think
it.
it's there.
Just leave it.
Because we've already said in the architectural design what we're hoping
Right.
for, and so they're going to complement.
Okay, so hopefully that's given you, Mackenzie, and Corey some good feedback.
Direction, yes,
And it looks
then-
awesome. Great job.
Yes, and we
Yes.
will, I am going to table discussion of the optional residential component. Let's go ahead and talk about that next time, hopefully when we've got,
Do we need to talk about a
Work session.
Work session.
yep, that's the next thing on my agenda. So Corey has proposed 3 different options here. So one, do we want to have 2 work sessions with the city council, one for the general plan and a second one after the zoning overlay ordinance? Do we want one single work session after preparing the general plan and zoning overlay, but prior to hosting public hearings? Or do we want to do the third recommendation, which is one single work session after the required public hearing, but before formulating a final recommendation? I'm not in favor of the third option.
No, me neither.
Yeah, I worry that that's gonna, the bus will be too far down the lane and it will be tough to turn.
Yeah.
Agreed.
You know, if the city council is not on the same page. So I really think that the 2 options then are, do we want to do one single work session or do we want to do 2 with the city council? I think I'm kind of leaning towards the one.
One.
I am too.
Let's do one.
Yeah, I'm okay with
You
that.
feel okay with that? Okay,
One before.
the one, yep. After preparing the general plan and zoning overlay, but before we
But before the
start
public
doing a bunch of
hearings.
public
Yes.
hearings.
Yeah.
And then we can always look, after we get the public hearing comments back, we can always recircle and
Absolutely.
say,
Yep.
okay, now that we've got all this feedback, let's go ahead and chat with the city council again, or maybe we'll think that we don't need it. So,
Yep.
yep, let's plan on that then. Okay, did we not have any minutes
We
to
don't.
review and approve?
Because remember, Katie just said she finished listening to our meeting.
Oh, that's right, you did. I was like, that's freaking me out a little that they weren't in the packet. So let's go back to item number 2. Our applicant is still not here, but I think let's go ahead and move forward with addressing what they have here. So I will turn the time over to staff.
Thank you. So the applicants came July 10th and they received their conceptual site plan approval. And with the provisions stated on the second page, they have completed all of those items. And they now have, that item 3, they now have all of the trees planted. So that is all complete. So staff recommends approving or considering approval of this final site plan. And they did provide a site plan. Because it is not, the property is not an acre, they do not, the code does not require that a landscape architect create that plan. So that is up to you to decide if their plan is sufficient, but they have met all of the requirements from their conceptual site plan.
Great, thank you. Any questions for staff?
I appreciate that clarification about the requirement not needing a landscape architect.
This has not been noticed. I don't see that it's been noticed for a public hearing. Lisa, is that consistent with your understanding?
Right, that we don't have public hearings at, well, I guess this is an amendment to the final site plan.
So no public hearing?
Amendment to the final site plan.
All right, I just wanted to make sure I didn't see that.
I
in
can
my-
double check. The
in my
first one
packet.
we had actually just said public meeting. It wasn't
Yeah.
actually a required public hearing.
Okay. I just don't want to get us in trouble by not having a hearing if we need to have one, not that anyone is here to comment, but
I can double check.
I am a rule follower, Lisa.
I like that.
Would you get in trouble if you held a public meeting without noticing?
What? Well, we are holding a public meeting.
The public
Even
hearing.
if we had a public hearing.
Excuse me, public hearing?
You wouldn't get in trouble, but it wouldn't qualify as, if
public.
public
Because you
hearing
haven't
was
noticed it.
required and you hadn't noticed it, then we'd just have to have another one with the notice.
So it doesn't matter anyway if we do it. Okay,
I mean, it would be moot since again, nobody is
Yes.
here.
Great.
thank
But-
you.
All right, you all right if I move on, Lisa, or do you want me to allow you to?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, I was gonna say,
I'll
I'm not
let-
trying to
I mean,
rush ya.
If a public hearing was required, we can just ratify it at the next
Okay.
meeting, but.
All right, so since the applicant is not here to address us and we're not obligated at this point to do a public hearing, any further comment or discussion on this one?
No, but I can understand maybe why the applicant didn't come, because everything's complete.
Yeah, they've
and
pretty much done everything.
They've done it, so.
Yep, okay.
Rockany Country Store approval.
Is that the qualified
Yeah.
landscape-ish architect?
It just says we have to have a public meeting on the final site plan.
Oh.
Okay,
Oh, here we are.
great. Chair will entertain a motion.
I hereby make a motion for the commission to approve the final site plan amendment for 181 South Main Street, subject to directives 1A through C in the staff report, with suggested finding A in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? If not, we'll start on, well, it's getting late.
Aye.
We'll start down on your end.
Aye.
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 Aye?
All right, thanks. Last item on the agenda, Community Development Director's Report and City Council Report. Mackenzie.
Yes. Let me pull it up. Okay, our next Planning Commission meeting is September 11th. We will continue our South Main Street discussion with that optional residential section. We'll also continue with our subdivision ordinance review, and currently there's nothing else.
Except I won't be here at the next meeting, so
Oh.
Okay,
I'll probably skip that one.
okay.
So no subdivision ordinance rewrite. We really look forward to those, Lisa.
I know,
This is-
sorry.
This is
We'll
going to be
give you
very
a break.
disappointing for us.
I could put one on there and you can, speak
It's
to me
not-
on the video.
we tried that one.
Yeah, we've done
and
that
we just
before.
tabled that.
We
We're
just
like,
tabled it.
Oh, Lisa's not here, we're gonna table that.
All right. With
You wanna get
that,
the city council report?
Oh, yeah.
didn't we get
Oh,
the city?
sorry,
Oh, you
I
haven't
didn't
given the
finish
city
that,
council
yes.
report.
Just the last two subdivision zoning and municipal code changes that were brought before Planning Commission last time were approved by City Council, about those letters of credit and bond or subdivision expiration. And then the Island View Park changes were approved, which Bruce brought up today, about the tennis court and the pickleball courts.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And with that, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Lisa voted.
Wait.